The lights in Riverside Regional Medical Center never dimmed. They hummed overhead like a swarm that refused to sleep, bleaching the waiting room into something colorless and cruel. Graham Sutter sat with his elbows on his knees, staring at the dried streaks on his hands that no amount of sanitizer had managed to erase. His daughter's blood had seeped into the lines of his skin as if his body had decided it would remember this day forever. Less than an hour earlier, he had been on a rocky slope above Coldwater Bluff, kneeling in pine needles and loose shale, cradling Lila against his chest while the wind tore at his jacket. Her small face had been pale, her lips trembling, her eyes trying to focus on him and failing. The ravine below had looked endless. The trail above had looked too far away. And then the rotor wash arrived, flattening the brush, whipping grit into his eyes as the rescue helicopter lowered through the mist like something unreal. Now the helicopter was gone. The mountains were gone. All that was left were double doors marked trauma, a plastic chair, and the thud of his heart refusing to accept that he could not follow his daughter into the place where strangers held her life in their hands. His phone vibrated against his thigh. A message filled the screen. From Nadine Kessler. Tessa's birthday dinner is tomorrow night. You will be there. No excuses. Graham read it once. Then again. He waited for the words to rearrange themselves into something that made sense. They didn't. He typed back with fingers that shook so hard the letters came out wrong the first time. Lila is in emergency surgery. She might not make it. The reply appeared almost instantly. If you miss this, you are dead to this family. Something in Graham's chest turned cold like a lock snapping shut. He didn't answer. He didn't argue. He simply blocked the number, powered off his phone, and sat there listening to the air conditioner breathe. Before I tell you what happened next, subscribe the channel and let me know in the comments where are you watching from. It helps more than you know. He didn't know how long passed. Time had turned syrup thick. People came and went. A vending machine clunked. A child cried down the hall and was hushed. Graham kept seeing Lila's hair tangled with leaves, kept hearing the thin, broken sound she'd made when she tried to say Dad and couldn't get it out. A door opened. A woman in scrubs approached, her cap pulled back, her eyes tired but steady. Her badge read, Dr. Anika Patel. Mr. Sutter? She asked. Graham stood so fast his knees threatened to buckle. How is she? She made it through surgery, Dr. Patel said carefully, as if each word had weight. The next few days are critical. She has a concussion, fractured ribs, and a punctured lung. We controlled internal bleeding. She's unconscious but stable. Graham's vision blurred. He exhaled a sound that might have been a sob, might have been a prayer. Can I see her? In a few minutes. We're moving her to the intensive care unit. Dr. Patel hesitated, her gaze shifting to his hands, to his face, to the way he was holding himself together by force alone. Mr. Sutter, I need to ask you something. Graham's relief stiffened into alarm. What? When she came in, you said she slipped near the overlook, but some bruising patterns on the upper arms don't always happen in a simple fall. We're required to ask. Was anyone else with Lila before she went over? The question landed like a stone dropped into water, spreading ripples he didn't want to follow. No, Graham said, it was just us. But even as he spoke, a memory surfaced. Small, sharp, unwanted. The night before the hike, Tessa had insisted on packing Lila's bag herself. Tessa had also handed Lila a travel mug of cocoa in the morning, smiling too brightly, watching too closely while Lila drank. It hadn't been a normal gesture. Tessa didn't do thoughtful gestures unless someone might see them. And on the trail, before the scream, Lila had gotten quiet, not tired, not cranky. Quiet in a way that felt wrong, like a room after a door has been closed. Dr. Patel watched him for a beat. If you remember anything, even if it seems small, tell us. Graham nodded, but his throat wouldn't cooperate. When the nurse finally led him through a maze of beeping monitors and curtains, the world narrowed to one bed. Lila lay there looking impossibly small, tubes threaded around her like vines. A machine pushed air into her lungs with a steady, mechanical patience. Her face was swollen, bruised along the cheekbone, and her eyelashes rested motionless against skin that had lost its usual warmth. Graham pulled a chair to her bedside and took her hand carefully, afraid that even love could hurt her now. I'm here, he whispered. I'm not going anywhere. He stayed until a nurse insisted he drink water. He stayed until his neck ached and his eyes burned and the monitors became background noise. When he finally turned his phone back on, the screen lit up with messages. Dozens. From Tessa, from her brother, from Nadine, now blocked but still trying through another number. None of them asked how Lila was doing. They demanded explanations, apologies, compliance. Graham stared at the glowing list, and for the first time in years he didn't feel confused by their anger. He felt something clearer. He felt warned. Because if a child is fighting for breath and the only thing your family can talk about is a birthday dinner, it means their priorities were never love. And if their priorities were never love, then Graham had to ask himself what else they were capable of. He looked back at Lila's still face, and he realized this wasn't just a hospital night anymore. It was the beginning of a reckoning. Graham slept in short, fractured stretches on a vinyl chair pulled against the wall of the intensive care unit. Every time the machines changed rhythm, his eyes snapped open. Every time a nurse passed, he held his breath until she moved on. He learned the ceiling tiles by heart. He learned the smell of antiseptic. He learned how long a minute could feel when you were waiting for a child to wake up. On the second morning, Lila's eyelids fluttered. It was subtle enough that a stranger might have missed it. Graham didn't. He was on his feet instantly, calling for the nurse with a voice that came out too loud, too desperate. They adjusted the oxygen mask. They spoke softly to her, guiding her back, telling her she was safe. Lila's eyes opened again, unfocused, then found him. Her fingers twitched in his hand. "Dad," she whispered. The word scraped out of her like it had to travel a long way to reach him. "I'm here," Graham said, leaning close so she wouldn't have to strain. "You did great. You're safe." Tears slid sideways into her hair. Her grip tightened with surprising strength, as if she were afraid he might disappear. She drifted back under before she could say anything else. But that single word stayed with him like a vow. Later that afternoon, his phone buzzed again. He almost ignored it, but the name on the screen stopped him. Evan Morales. Evan had been his closest friend since college, the kind of friend who didn't call unless it mattered. A civil litigator by trade, sharp-eyed and relentlessly practical, Evan had watched Graham's marriage unravel from a careful distance. "You look terrible," Evan said when he arrived with coffee and a clean shirt. It wasn't an insult. It was an assessment. "Feel worse," Graham replied. They sat on either side of Lila's bed, speaking in low voices. Graham filled him in on the fall, the surgery, the messages. "She hasn't asked about her daughter," Graham said finally. Evan didn't pretend not to understand. "That's not an accident." Graham rubbed his face. "I keep thinking I'm overreacting. That stress does strange things to people." "Stress reveals," Evan said. "It doesn't invent." That night, as if summoned by the thought, Tessa called. Graham answered this time. "You embarrassed me," she said without preamble. "My mother had to explain why you didn't show." "Our daughter is in intensive care," Graham said. "I know that," Tessa snapped. "But that doesn't mean you disappear. People notice." He closed his eyes. "Did you even ask how she is?" A pause. "Too long. The doctors will handle it," Tessa said. "When is she coming home?" Something in Graham's spine went rigid. "She's not coming home yet. You don't get to decide that alone. I'm her father. And I'm her mother," Tessa said sharply. "We'll talk when you're thinking clearly." The line went dead. Evan watched Graham carefully. "You hear it now, right?" "Hear what?" "The way she talks about Lila like a possession." Graham didn't answer. He didn't need to. The next morning, Dr. Patel asked Graham to step into a quiet room. Her expression was professional, but her eyes carried concern that went beyond charts and scans. "Lila asked for you last night," she said. "She was disoriented, but she said something that we can't ignore." Graham's pulse thudded. "What did she say?" Dr. Patel folded her hands. "She said she didn't want to go home, that she was scared." The words hit harder than any accusation. "She's been through a trauma," Graham said weakly. "Yes," Dr. Patel agreed. "And sometimes trauma loosens things children have been holding inside." "Mr. Sutter, I need to ask, has Lila been sick often in the last year or two?" Graham thought of missed school days, of unexplained nausea, of Tessa posting hospital selfies with captions about strength and motherhood, of test results that never quite lined up. "Yes," he said, "but no one could find a cause." Dr. Patel nodded slowly. "We're running additional tests." When Graham returned to Lila's bedside, she was awake again. Her eyes tracked him with urgency that didn't belong to a child recovering from surgery. "Dad," she whispered. You have to listen. I am, he said, leaning close. She swallowed, winced, then pressed on. The night before the trips, I couldn't sleep. I went downstairs. His chest tightened. Okay. Mom and Nana were in the kitchen. They didn't hear me. Her breathing quickened. Nana said you were the problem, that I was making things harder. Mom was crying. Graham's mind raced. What did they say, sweetheart? They talked about money, Lila said, about how things would be easier if something happened. Nana said accidents happen on trails, that nobody would question it. The room seemed to tilt. The cocoa tasted bad, Lila whispered. I didn't want it. Mom made me drink it. She watched. A nurse hurried in as the monitors began to complain, calming Lila, guiding her back into rest. Graham stood there frozen, every memory rearranging itself into a pattern he had never wanted to see. Evan pulled him into the hallway. We call the police. With what? Graham said hoarsely. A child's statement while medicated? Evan exhaled. Then we get proof. Graham looked through the glass at his daughter, small and bruised and brave. For years he had kept the peace. He had explained away red flags. He had believed patience was protection. He understood now how wrong that was, because if someone was willing to gamble with a child's life, peace was just permission, and Graham Sutter was done giving it. Graham did not go home. Instead, he stayed within the small orbit of the hospital. Cafeteria, ICU corridor, a narrow bench by the windows that overlooked the river. He told himself it was because Lila might wake and need him. The truth was simpler and harder to admit. The idea of returning to a house filled with Tessa's voice and Nadine's invisible authority made his skin crawl. Evan worked quietly beside him, making calls that sounded casual but weren't. I want you to meet someone, Evan said late that afternoon. She owes me a favor. The woman arrived just before dusk. Her name was Mara Ellison. She wore jeans, a dark jacket, and an expression that missed nothing. Former federal investigator, now private sector, the kind of person who specialized in things that lived in the cracks between civil and criminal. She tells me you think your daughter was poisoned, Mara said, getting straight to it. Graham flinched at the word, but he nodded. I don't want to believe it. Good, Mara replied. Belief makes people sloppy. Evidence doesn't. She asked about timelines, about symptoms, about patterns. Graham found himself talking for nearly an hour, the story spilling out now that someone was listening without judgment. She was sick on and off, he said. Always at home. When she stayed with my sister for a weekend, she was fine. Mara's pen paused. That matters. What about the cocoa? Evan asked. Do you still have it? Mara said. Graham's stomach dropped. The mug is in the camping gear. I'll take care of that, Mara said, with a warrant. The first results came faster than Graham expected. Blood work showed traces of a sedative inconsistent with hospital-administered medication. Low dose, repeated exposure. Dr. Patel didn't accuse. She didn't need to. Her silence said enough. Tessa arrived the next morning with Nadine at her side. They swept into the ICU like they owned it. Flowers, performative concern. Nadine spoke first. When is she being discharged? She demanded. That hasn't been decided, Graham said evenly. Tessa reached for Lila's hand. Lila flinched. It was small, almost invisible, but Graham saw it. So did Dr. Patel, who stepped forward smoothly. She needs rest, the doctor said. We're limiting stimulation. This is ridiculous, Nadine snapped. I'm her grandmother, and I'm her physician, Dr. Patel replied. Hospital policy applies to everyone. The visit lasted less than 15 minutes. In that time, neither woman asked about Lila's prognosis. They talked about inconvenience, about appearances, about how Graham was making things difficult. When they left, Nadine leaned close. We will discuss this later, when you're ready to be reasonable. Graham watched them go and felt something settle into place. They wanted Lila home, away from tests, away from questions. Mara confirmed it that evening. Your house has cameras, she said. Did you know that? Graham stared at her. Tessa insisted on them. There are more than you know, Mara said, on hidden ones, kitchen, living room, office. Violation washed over him. Why? Control, Mara said, and leverage. She slid a tablet across the table. Footage played, late night, the kitchen. Tessa and Nadine sitting close, voices low but clear. We're running out of time, Nadine said on the recording. The debts won't wait. I can't keep doing this, Tessa replied. She's my child. Love doesn't pay bills, Nadine said coldly. An accident solves everything. Graham felt sick, not surprised. Sick. Mara paused the video. There's more. Financials. She laid it out methodically. Credit cards, loans, a charity with impressive brochures and thin actual giving. Insurance policies Graham barely remembered signing. One on himself, one on Lila. The math was obscene. They expected you to be distracted, Mara said. Grief makes people careless. Evans swore under his breath. This is conspiracy. Yes, Mara said, and attempted murder. But the footage, Graham said, is it admissible? Mara smiled thinly. Not directly, but it's useful. They moved Lila that night to a secure pediatric wing. Graham signed temporary orders. Tessa protested. Nadine threatened. It didn't matter. The story broke quietly at first. A court filing. A reporter who specialized in family court records. No embellishment, just facts. Local mother under investigation after child's mysterious illness. Tessa's carefully curated image cracked overnight. Friends asked questions, sponsors pulled back. Nadine's charity board demanded explanations. 5 years after the fall, Graham Sutter stood near the back of a school auditorium, hands clasped loosely, watching his daughter walk across the stage. Lila moved with an easy confidence now, taller, stronger. Her hair was pulled back the way she liked it. Practical, no fuss. When her name was called, she didn't hesitate. She accepted the certificate, smiled at the applause, and scanned the room until her eyes found his. Graham lifted 2 fingers in their old signal. I'm here, always. She smiled wider. The applause faded, replaced by chatter and movement, but Graham stayed rooted for a moment, letting the noise wash over him. There had been a time when he wasn't sure he'd ever see this. A time when hospital lights and beeping machines had felt like the entire world. Now that world felt far away, and life didn't snap back into shape after the trial. It eased itself together slowly, unevenly, like a bone healing. There were months when Lila woke from nightmares, heart racing, asking if the doors were locked. There were days when Graham caught himself scanning crowds, instincts sharpened by fear that no longer had a place to land. But fear, he learned, doesn't disappear all at once. It loosens its grip when you stop feeding it. Therapy helped, routine helped, honesty helped most of all. Graham never lied to his daughter about what had happened. He didn't give her details she didn't ask for, but he didn't wrap the truth in excuses either. Children, he learned, don't need stories softened. They need them anchored. Nadine remained in prison. Appeals failed. The years stretched ahead of her, empty and unremarkable, and her name surfaced occasionally in the news. Another denied motion, another asset seized. But those stories no longer stirred anything in Graham. Tessa tried once to reach out through a third party. A letter, carefully worded, apologetic in tone, vague in substance. Graham let Lila decide what to do with it. She read 3 sentences, folded the paper, and dropped it into the trash. I'm done carrying that, she said simply. Graham didn't argue. They moved houses again, this time not out of fear but choice. A place closer to Lila's school, sunlight in the kitchen, neighbors who waved without prying, no past clinging to the walls. On weekends they hiked easy trails near the lake, wide paths, clear sight lines. Lila chose them. Control mattered. One afternoon, sitting on a rock overlooking the water, Lila asked, do you think people like her are born that way? Graham thought about it. I think some people learn early that love is something you trade instead of something you give. And we don't? No, he said, that we don't. She nodded, satisfied. Graham never remarried quickly. He learned the value of space, of paying attention. When someone eventually entered their lives, it was slowly, carefully, with no performance and no pressure. Lila's comfort came first. It always would. On the anniversary of the accident, Graham took the day off work. They didn't mark it with ceremony. They went for pancakes. They laughed about a spilled glass of juice. They talked about ordinary things. That was the victory. Not the convictions, not the articles, not the public exposure that had burned through lies like dry brush. And the victory was this, an ordinary day, unafraid. That night, after Lila had gone to bed, Graham sat on the porch and looked up at the stars, the same stars that had hung over Coldwater Bluff all those years ago. Back then they'd felt distant, uncaring. Now they felt steady. He understood something he hadn't before. Protecting someone you love doesn't always look like strength. Sometimes it looks like patience. Sometimes it looks like waiting. And sometimes it looks like standing up and letting the truth destroy what deserves to fall. Graham didn't feel like a hero. He felt like a father who finally did his job the right way. Inside, Lila slept peacefully. No machines, no monitors, just quiet. That was enough. And if you've been listening this far, subscribe to the channel and let me know in the comments what time it is where you're watching from. It helps more than you know.